let's get started. So I am going to talk today about some interviewing insights that I want to share with you because we want our students to be successful when they go into an interview. And I really haven't met many people who just think interviewing is just loads of fun. In fact, it can be a really stressful situation for people. And so I really want to help you to really have some strategies and some ways that you can practice and develop those skills. So when you get an interview, the great news is that the employer liked something that they saw on your resume or on your application. They think you have potential. So they've decided that they're going to spend part of their workday talking with you to evaluate you as a candidate. So this is your chance to really sell yourself. And so they're really trying to say, honestly, they're looking at you and they're saying, is this somebody I would like to be my coworker? And when you think about that, I don't know if any of you have ever had jobs where you've worked with a coworker who just ruined the whole thing. Nod if you know what I'm talking about, okay? Where it's like, oh, it would be really fun except for this guy, right? And so what employers are looking for is they want to make sure that they're adding to their team. They don't want to add somebody who's going to detract from that. But the important thing I also want you to know is that you're also interviewing the employer. And so, again, we'll talk later about the questions that you can ask at the end of the interview, but you're really trying to get a feel for, is this an organization? Is this a good fit for me as far as culture? Do I want to work here? So I just want to encourage you to think in terms of, evaluating them as well. And I love this quote that I found from a book, Knock 'em Dead Interviews, How to Turn Job Interviews into Job Offers. He says, if you lived in the wild, you'd need to know how to make fire to survive. But you live in an urban world and you need to make money. That means you need a job, and the only way to get a job is by turning a job interview into a job offer. So that's what we want to help you with today. So we're going to talk about the 3 different phases of the interview, and I would tell you the before, during, and after. What we dread is the during, right? The during the interview questions. We don't want to look foolish. We want to do all the right things. But I would tell you that from my perspective, I think what you do before the interview and after the interview are as important, if not more so. So we'll talk about that, but just know we're going to go through these different phases, and then at the end, we'll have some time for questions. So let's get started talking about before the interview. Excuse me, I got too excited with my clicker. So you want to make sure that you dress for success. You want to use your appearance as a professional tool in an interview. Whenever you go in, you want to make sure your hair is neat. Get a haircut if possible. It would be really hard to do that right now, so don't cut your own bangs, right? They're cautioning us about that, okay? But you're going to want to get a haircut. Dress in conservative business attire. I always tell students a black or a navy suit. If you're going to buy something for an interview, that's the standard. Now, we could have conversations about different industries, and you could get some differing advice, but a black or a navy suit really with polished shoes, white shirt or blouse, and a conservative tie if you're a man, that's really sort of the standard look. And for most undergraduate students who are graduating college, the 2 things you have working against you are that you're young and inexperienced, right? So when you show up wearing a black or a navy suit, it looks like you know how the game is played. It looks like you understand what it means to be a professional. And so you're saying a lot with that nonverbal communication. Make sure that your clothes are neat, clean, and pressed. I'm not trying to insult anyone's intelligence, but I'm just saying, this isn't the thing that you dig out of the bottom of the closet that you meant to take to the cleaner. And the other thing I'll say is to avoid excessive jewelry, makeup, cologne, perfume. I don't know about you all, but living in the Texas Panhandle, I've got some allergies, right? So if I have a candidate that comes into my office for an interview and I shut the door and they're wearing heavy perfume, I'm going to try to get rid of that person as soon as I can, meaning I want the interview to be over, because it's not comfortable to be in an interview with somebody who just has so much perfume on. So these are some examples of some appropriate interview attire. I don't know if you all have ever been to the fashion show that takes place the week of the Career Expo, but these are some pictures from some of those in the past. And what's really interesting is that many of these students, this is from years ago. And so what's interesting is that these looks are timeless. Like what they're wearing is appropriate. It was appropriate 10 years ago when we took these photos, or 5 years ago when we took these photos, and it's still appropriate now. But what you'll notice is that there's nothing about them them that's like screaming at you, right? There's no like neon clothes, or the tie doesn't have like Santa Claus or Buddy the Elf on it, right? It looks professional. And so I just encourage you to really think about that. One of the pieces of advice I give to students is that when you're dressing for an interview, one of the things you might think about is asking like your mom or somebody who is Gen X or older how you look. Because the truth is, your friend is going to tell you you look precious, but someone my age or older, which is probably going to be the age of the person interviewing you, they may be noticing things about your appearance that your friend would not notice. So things like, wow, that skirt is kind of short, or goodness, those flip flops are cute, but not for an interview. So I would encourage you to think in terms of that whenever you are getting ready for an interview. This is maybe the most important slide that we'll talk about, because this is going to set you up for success. But before you go for an interview, the most important thing is that you do your research. I'm going to go over with you in just a little while some of the commonly asked interview questions, and we're going to talk about the 60-second elevator pitch. You also want to have an idea about what salary you would like to earn. And you also want to know where the interview is, and where it's located within the building. For those of you who, when you came to WT, like we use words like, over the ANS or the classroom center or the CC, right? We use lingo like that. So if you're interviewing at a large company and they say, yeah, we're located at CC 213, you don't necessarily know where that is. And so you want to make sure that you give yourself some time to figure that out. So we encourage students sometimes to go the day before and really check that out. But when we're talking about researching the organization, you want to know about that company. You want to do some good research. You want to understand what they do and why you want to work there. And so really take some time to do this. Look over that job posting. They're going to have a job posting, and that's what you've maybe applied for. And that job posting is going to have like some necessary qualifications. It's going to talk to you about the work that you're going to do. And you want to understand, goodness, what am I going to be doing here? What do these people do for a living? And so that you can really answer those interview questions with a lot of confidence. Okay, so then we're talking about where it's closer to time. Check your appearance, right? Have several copies of your resume and references to take with you. Sometimes you'll go for an interview and it'll end up being 10 people in a conference room. So make sure that you have several copies of your resume and your references. We also encourage students to take a notepad and paper for notes. I actually brought home with me, now that I'm working from home. This is one of our Padfolios in Career Services. I hope you guys can see me in the picture, but we give these away to students who attend our our pre-fair receptions, because we want students to have these. But when you open it up, you'll notice it has like a notepad, so you'd be able to write some interview questions, and it has like a little folder on this side so that you could put copies of your resume. I'm sorry, this is awkward, but anyway, this is what we encourage students to have. So consider a nice Padfolio when you're going on those interviews, and have a list of the questions that you want to ask. Have some intelligent questions prepared so that you don't get to the end and then you're like, oh goodness, I forgot my own name. So be sure that you've done that. We encourage you to arrive about 5 to 10 minutes early for your interview, and then go into the restroom and check your appearance one last time. There's really nothing more embarrassing than getting in the car after your interview and recognizing that your skirt was like trapped in your hose, or you've got lipstick on your teeth, or you're dragging some toilet paper on your shoe, that sort of thing. So just that way you can go in with confidence. But you want to be there 5 to 10 minutes early. If they're doing lots of interviews and they're running ahead of schedule, it's going to be really nice that you were there early. And it just shows a level of professionalism. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the during the interview part. First impressions are so critical. And so, not to insult anyone on this call or on this webinar, but you want to greet your interviewer with a firm, friendly handshake. You want to smile and make eye contact with them. Eye contact is huge. That nonverbal communication is saying so much. And people are making judgments about you in your interview. Like, that's essentially what they're doing. They're looking at you and trying to decide if you'd be a good candidate. So smile. Some of you have a serious face even right now in this webinar, okay? So I want you to do me a favor. I'm going to spread this out and look at you. I want you all to smile at me. They're like, you can't make me. Okay. I am not in your classroom. I know I can't make you, but you've got great smiles. And so my encouragement is to be sure that you show those off. When you're nervous and you look like you're in pain, that's painful also for the person that's doing the interviewing. So smile, be excited to be there. Have any of you ever heard the term RBF? If you haven't, you need to look it up in the Urban Dictionary, but don't tell anyone I told you to do that. So anyway, but you don't want to have that. You don't want to look that way when you're actually in an interview. You want to look approachable and kind and like somebody who they would like to be coworkers with. So make sure you've practiced your handshake. You want a firm, friendly handshake. We talk a lot about going in web to web. When you're sorry, I have this weird thing on my finger, but make sure your fingers are together and you go in and you have that firm handshake. Make sure that you shake a woman's hand just as strongly as you would a man's hand, but don't be a bone crusher. And also, don't be a limp fish. If your hands are sweaty, kind of discreetly kind of wipe them off on your clothes as you're going in. This is a lot to remember, but I'm just saying, think in terms of, confidently going in for a handshake. Don't do too many pumps. Just about 3 pumps is enough, right? And really make that great first impression. And this is where I would say, hi, my name is Amber Black. It's so nice to meet you. And then you're listening for their name and you're trying to, make sure that you can call the people by name that are there in your interview. Okay, so during the interview, I want you to focus on the points that you've prepared. That means you've prepared. So we want you to try and relax and enjoy the conversation. Be yourself, but remember that it is an interview. So if yourself is a little bit casual or, uh, you know, uh, makes crude jokes, don't be yourself. You know what I'm saying? So you want to be professional in the interview. Then you're going to thank that interviewer, make sure you know the next steps. And we'll talk about this in a minute, but you want to ask for business cards for everybody that's a part of your interview so that you can follow up with thank you notes after. So you're not going to do that first thing. Don't just run right in there and say, hey, you have a business card, because that would be weird, right? But like maybe as you're concluding, you might say, Miss Bertha, do you happen to have a business card that I can take with me, just so that you can have that when you're finished? Okay, this is a funny. I'm trying to make jokes, and so you guys have to like virtually laugh at these, okay? But I love this. During a job interview yesterday, I poured some water into a cup and it overflowed slightly. Nervous? Asked the interviewer. I replied simply, no, I always give 110%. Okay, thank you for the virtual laughs. Okay, here we go. Moving on. So one of my colleagues, Steve, in his presentation that he shared with me, he says this, and I think it's so good. But when you're thinking about interview questions, it all boils down to these 3 things. They're wondering, can you do the job? Do you have a passion for doing the job? And then finally, will we like you doing the job? And so you want to filter all your answers and all the examples that you give through these 3 basic questions. You want to assure them, yes, I can do the job. You want them to know, yes, I want this very job. And you want them to know you're a likable person and somebody that would be a great addition to their team, someone that they'd like to have as a coworker. Okay, so we're starting with some interview questions. So if you're making a list, you can do that. We'll share the presentation with you after, but if you would like to make some notes, I think that would be wonderful. But I'm just going to tell you some version of this question has been asked in every interview that I've either conducted or when I myself was being interviewed. But they will say some version of, tell me about yourself, right? Sometimes, so at WT, the question that we ask is, tell me about yourself as it relates to this position, okay? So when this happens, you need to be prepared for it. And this is where the elevator pitch comes in strong. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about what that's like. But you don't wing this. This is not one of those questions where you're like, I wasn't expecting that. Well, my name is Amber. What else do you want to know? Like, it's not going well if that's the way, you know what I'm saying? So you want to make sure that you're prepared for that question. And I would just encourage you, be so prepared for this question that you can nail that first question, because if you can answer that with confidence, I think the rest of the interview will just continue to get better and better. Okay, so when we talk about the elevator pitch, we have sort of a 4-step model. We're going to post a handout after this in the events in Handshake, so you'll be able to go in and download this. If you're doing this for a class assignment, maybe for a management course, if this sounds familiar to some of you, just know that this is what we're talking about. If he's asking you at the end to fill out this information about an elevator pitch, this is what we're talking about. So the first step in this process is really just a quick introduction. Hi, my name is Amber Black. I am a recent graduate of West Texas A&M University. I just finished my MBA. Prior to that, I have an undergraduate degree in marketing. I really did love my time at WT. It was a great experience for me. Now we're going to put a little pause in there because it's been a few years since I graduated WT, but anyway, I'm trying to do this as if I just graduated like many of you. So that's what we would say after step one. And then this is where we talk about what we're looking for. I'm looking for a job where I can utilize my marketing and communication skills to really serve and help people. That's really my passion, is helping people. So I want to find an opportunity where I can do that and help you grow your business. Okay, so talk about them and what you can offer them. And then when we talk about what experience do you have? I've been working in higher education for about 10 years now. I've had several different roles. Most recently, I've been serving as the director for career services, but before that, I helped start a leadership program on campus, and then I worked to help start our Student Success Center when that started 10 years ago. I have been involved in various things on campus, including staff council and Future Marketing People of America. I just made that up. Okay, and then the next step will be, what can you offer? So this is where you can say, when I was reviewing the job description, one of the things I loved about this job is that it says that this position will actually get to manage all of the social media, and I am so good at the Facebook. That was a joke for anyway, but okay. So, but again, being able to talk about what you can do, and then even knowing your Clifton strengths. If you don't know your Clifton strengths, you need to email us in career services so we can get you instructions on how to take the Strengths Finder. But knowing your strengths and being able to talk about those, this is where you could say something like, my number one strength is positivity. And so more than anything, I think I bring energy and enthusiasm to the work environment. And that makes me really proud. I think that's something that could really benefit your team. And, I really love working on teams that become like family. And so I would really love it if, I would have the opportunity to join your organization. Okay. But remember, you're going to focus on what you have to offer the employer. So there are, it's great that you can juggle with your left hand, but if that's not something they care about, that's not really what you want to talk about here. So really think in terms of, what do I have to offer that would add value to the employer? All right. Okay, so when they ask you about your strengths, they're going to say, so tell us what strengths you think you would bring to our company. All right, please don't just start rattling off. I've got woo, belief, achiever. Okay, if any of you know about those words, those are the Clifton Strengths words, and those are great, but I want you to really explain what you mean by that. Like, because you have woo, what do you think you can offer that the company cares about? So we're looking for knowledge-based skills. And so if you're in a technical field, this maybe is where you say, listen, I am a dynamic programmer in the A2000 system. I don't really know what that is. I just made it up, but I'm giving you that as an example in case it's a technical role. Or maybe you could say, I am a recent graduate of the nursing program and I'm already working towards my CCRN certification. It's those sorts of things that you can be able to tell them, where you can really talk about the strengths that you have to offer. For some of you, you may have, we see with a lot of the ag majors that we have on campus, they may have been, they've worked on a family farm or ranch for like since they were 10 years old. And so being able to say, I know I don't look that old, but I've actually been working, I have 10 years of ranching experience. Those kinds of things could really be really impressive to an employer. So you want to be able to talk about those skills that you have that match what the employer has said they want in the job posting. Okay, I love this one. Here's another funny. At a job interview, what are your strengths? I'm an optimist and a positive thinker. Can you give me an example? Yes. When do I start? Anyway, no one's laughing. Okay, so thank you, Kylie Scott. You are laughing. Thank you for that. Okay, so another question that they're going to ask you, and I think this is one of the hardest questions, because you're all ready to sell yourself, and they'll say something like, "What is your biggest weakness?" So this is a dreaded question, and you need to practice for this. They're gonna ask you some version of this. So again, you want to concentrate on professional traits, stay really away from those personal ones, and you're going to talk about what you're doing to strengthen this weakness. So I'll give you an example. You're going to start by saying you're going to admit something that's a weakness for you, and you can admit that, you can be honest about that. But if you don't prepare for this question, you'll say something like, oh, I'm late everywhere I go. And the employer is going to think to themselves, I don't want any of that, right? So make sure that you are professional in the answer to this question. Okay, so an example that you might give is something like, well, one of the things that I struggled with when I was in college was time management. And so in high school, it always worked for me to just wait till the night before to study for an exam, or I, would just stay up all night and write a paper. But when I was in college, my sophomore year, I took anatomy and physiology. And I realized for the first time that that was not going to work for me anymore. I really struggled on my first exam because I tried to cram the night before. So I actually considered some advice that my academic advisor gave me, and I started keeping a planner. And so every Sunday, what I would do is I would just make a list of everything that I had to do, throughout the semester. I took note of due dates and so forth. And then I would actually just block off times on my calendar. I used a lot of Sunday evenings to do this, and other times that I could carve out throughout the week because I also worked while I was in school. But I would actually use those times to try to get ahead on all the projects that I had that were coming up that week, papers that were going to be coming due that month. And that way, I could do better. And so I'm proud to report that, I had really good grades that semester. And so although I still struggle with it, I would tell you that I've improved a lot. So do you see how I told them I've got this weakness, but I'm not just like living with it. It's not just something that you're going to have to deal with. Like I'm working on that. I heard recently that sometimes an employer will they'll ask the question, so tell me another weakness, because they know that everybody has one prepared in the can. So make sure that you have a couple of examples here, things that you could talk about, as far as this is a weakness that I have and here's how I'm working to improve. Okay, when they ask you the question, why should we hire you? For the love, people, make sure that you talk about why they should hire you, and you should know why they should hire you. So create your sales pitch, match what you have, that what you're looking for. So from my research as well as our conversation, I understand that you're looking for someone who can blah blah blah, right? You're going to talk about, listen, this is what I have to offer you. So um, yeah, we ask this question a lot to students, even when we're doing a resume review, like, why should they hire you to be a social worker? Or why is it that you'd be great in this position? And so if you can't answer that question, the employer's going to really struggle to believe that you're the right fit. So make sure that you have a good answer to that question. Okay, this is a good one. Why do you want to work here? You want to make sure that you give an answer that indicates you've thought about where you want to work. And so do some research on the organization. So some good places that you can go here. Make sure that you've looked at their mission statement, their website, like financial statements. If they're a publicly traded company, even kind of just checking like what are people saying in the news about them right now, right? So positive things about the company. But here's what I will tell you. One of the questions we always ask whenever we're doing an interview for career services is, tell me what you know about career services. And if you don't know anything about us, first of all, you have insulted us, because we love career services, right? So you have to know something about our company or our organization. And it's not enough to say, like, I think you help people find jobs. It's like, really? Like, so I'm going to tell you, this is a true story. And this is why I got a job in higher education. I had a 10-year career in banking. And so there was this job posted for the Student Success Center manager at WT, and I so wanted the job. And I had some skills, from some management skills and some, just administrative skills that I had developed through my career in banking. And I thought they would be a really good fit for the position, but I wanted the job so much. So I had a telephone interview, and based on what I learned later, I think they had someone else in mind for the job. So I just want you to know that getting the job for me, it was really about being so well prepared. So they had asked me a question, something about, tell me about what ideas you have that could help our students be successful. And so that was the interview question, and it gave me the opportunity to really show off the preparation that I had done. So what I did was, the night before the interview, the phone interview, I actually read the university strategic plan. It was 45 pages on the website. It wasn't fun, and it was pretty boring. Okay, I'm just being real with you. Now, I didn't read every word of the 45 pages, but what I did is I studied everything that had anything to do with student success, right? Because I was going to be the Student Success Center manager. So I wanted to know about the job, and I wanted to know what the campus was going to do. So when they asked the question, so tell me what ideas you have, I said, well, according to the strategic plan for the university, I noticed that you're working to improve your retention rate from blah, blah, blah percent to 74%. And some ideas that I think that we could do are, and then I just had tangible ideas of the ways that I thought that I could add value. And so y'all, when you say something like that in an interview, when you've done research or you know something that the person interviewing you doesn't know, they're thinking to themselves, I haven't even read the strategic plan. Like we should get her on our team and she could tell us what it says. Right? So make sure that you're very well prepared when you go in there. This is your chance to shine. Okay, when they ask you about your goals, they want to really see one of these are marketable skills that we call career management. I think they want to know, like, do you expect to be the CEO next week? Or are you willing to put in some time and learn the business and that sort of thing? So make sure you have some self-awareness and you're able to communicate that. We want you to think about what it is that you really want and be honest. But I would say, like, it probably wouldn't be a great answer to say, well, I'm just looking for a job for a year until I can save up money and study abroad, right? Like, that's not necessarily like that's not necessarily what we're talking about here. So again, summarize what you want and think of examples about how what you want would benefit the employer. So I'm looking to learn and grow. I hope that after a few years working with you, I would be able to be promoted to the next level. I hope that you'll be impressed with my quality of work and that I will have other opportunities that will come. And then, really just talk about, like, I want to start out as a credit analyst at the bank, but eventually I'd love to be promoted to commercial lender. Like, that would be an example of sort of understanding the career path that you're wanting to be on. So those are just some examples. Okay, so when they say, what can you do for us that other candidates can't? This is your opportunity to set yourself apart from other candidates. So really think about this. Think about, just what really does set you apart. Like when you compare yourself to your peers, right? What is the thing that really makes you awesome? And so sometimes that might be, I'm really hardworking. Like, I would work so hard to do a good job. I learn quickly. What are those traits that you have that would make you an asset as a new employee, a new hire for their company? This is a good one. What are 3 positive things your last boss would say about you? All right. So this is not the time for you to bust out laughing and say something ugly about your former supervisor, right? So this is not where you say, "Well, my last boss was a big jerk." I mean, so you want to make sure that you can think about that. But this is a good time. You could look at your old performance appraisals, like if you've ever had like an evaluation of your work at work, and so you said, "Well, my boss once told me this," or "My supervisor always asks me if I can close because they think I do a really good job and I'm really responsible." So be able to think about those things, like 3 positive things that your boss would say about you. Okay, so this can get really tricky. I'll tell you, like Pantex is an organization, if you're familiar with them, they use behavioral interviewing a lot. So I wanted to touch on behavioral interviewing in this workshop. But behavioral interview questions, I'll give you some sample questions here in just a minute. But these are the questions when they say, tell me about a time when. And we've used these questions in interviews that we've done in career services. And one of the things I'll tell you about this is that we're looking for specifics. So write that word down, specific information that you can provide that will really show that you have what they're looking for or that you would handle a situation well. So um, when you're approaching a behavioral interview question, really using what we call the STAR method is a really good way to do that. So the first thing is really to talk about the situation. So let me give you an example. Here's some sample questions, but one of these is give an example of when you showed initiative and took the lead. Okay, so that's one of the questions that's here on that. So what you would do is you would talk about the situation. Now, y'all, it doesn't always have to be a work situation. It could be a student organization project that you were a part of or a group project in college. So there's lots of ways that you can think in terms of this. But if they say, tell me about a time when you took initiative, right? You can say, well, I was the president of my fraternity on campus, and we were tasked with putting together a fundraiser for St. Jude's. And so the goal that we were working towards is that we really wanted to raise at least $1 billion at our chili cook-off. So here are the actions that I took is that I created this Google document. And so I learned to delegate to the different members of my fraternity. And so I was responsible for all of the marketing and all of the gaining sponsorships, but the other people in our organization, they were supposed to do the various other tasks. And then finally, you want to make sure you talk about the results. Discuss the outcome and work to highlight several positive results. You can be honest and you can say, listen, that event, I mean, it was rough and it rained that day. And so we didn't quite raise the $1 billion that we were wanting through the chili cook-off. But some of the things I learned was, I learned how to be organized. I learned about the importance of communication. I think it really strengthened my ability to really talk to people in the community. So those are the types of things that you could really highlight using the STAR method. So make sure you do that. One of the things that we noticed, we did some interviews recently in career services for a particular position, and one of the candidates who interviewed for the position, they like talked in generalities, right? So I'm asking them, tell me about a time when you had to work under pressure, let's say. And the candidate would say things like, well, when I have to work under pressure, like they never would really give us a specific something. And so I want them to tell me about a real time, a real lifetime where they had to do this. So if someone's asking you behavioral interview questions, they're wanting specifics. And sometimes they're tricky. Tell me about a recent situation in which you had to deal with a very upset customer or coworker, right? And so you want to think about a professional way to answer that question. But again, you want to be as specific as possible when you're answering these questions. Okay, so they're also going to ask you a question sometimes where they'll ask you, what salary are you seeking? And so this information you can find out at career fairs. A lot of times you can talk at our Career Expo to different employers who are hiring, and you can find out, okay, what's the going rate for that? But y'all, we have a great resource for you. I'm going to give you our website right now. It's www.wtamu.edu/career. And on that page, there is a box or kind of a little graphic about halfway down the page that says post-graduation success. And Kim will send you the link to this. But what is so cool about this is that you can actually log in to that website and you can see what people in your major are earning. And that will give you a great, oh, your cat's cute. That will give people that will give you a great idea about what people actually earn with your degree. Because let's say when they say, what salary are you seeking? If you're like, well, like 80,000 seems to be like a good number, right? And let's say that the average starting salary for people in your profession is averaging about 45,000 to start. You don't want to price yourself out of the ballpark. But one thing I would say is just think about how impressive your answer would be if you said, well, I did some research with my university career center, and I know that marketing majors on average last year earned about $40,000. So I would, based on what the research I've done about your company and these type of roles in our community, I feel like that would be in line with the market right now. So if you say that, and like you've done your homework, that's going to be a lot better than like, yeah, I don't know, what do you think I'm worth? Like, ask for what you'd like, but be careful and make sure that it's in line with what the market's paying. Okay, so we're gonna, I want you guys to use your chat feature if you don't mind. So everybody find your chat feature. And I want you to share with the group the craziest interview question that you've ever been asked. I always learn a lot from this. And so I think that will be a really fun thing. So I'm trying to access, excuse me, my chat feature, just a minute. Okay, so if you guys would just type in the group chat, tell me the funniest interview question, the craziest interview question you've ever been asked. If you were a cereal, what would you be and why? Okay. Oh, if you were a color, what would you be? Gonna wait to get a few more examples here. Oh, whiskey, water, or wine, and why? That's a good one. What type of chips would you be? Oh, wow. Are you peanut butter or jelly? Huh. If leadership were a stack of pancakes, where would you be? Okay, so, oh, in a PB&J sandwich, what are you? Oh my. Those are fun. Okay, so who knew that peanut butter and jelly was so popular? Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about these questions. One thing that I think people don't always talk to you about is like just the strategy for like they throw you a curveball, right? And what they're wanting to do is to see how do you react, right, when you get a question you weren't expecting. Are you able to adapt? Are you able to kind of go with the flow? So when you are asked a crazy interview question, if you're really not prepared to answer it, just say this: "Can I have just a minute to think about that?" Right? And just give yourself a second to think about the answer to the question, and then give your best response. But again, a lot of times, when they ask you crazy questions, the wine, whiskey, or water, and why, is there a right answer to that question? Probably not, right? And it also gives you an opportunity to show if you have a sense of humor, right? So you can say like for the rest of my life, or just at dinner, or I mean, you could really have fun with that question. So sometimes they're trying to see, do you have a personality? So think in terms of that. But it's probably not a good answer to that question to say whiskey all day, every day, right? That would be a bad answer, right? But thinking in terms of, how can I respond to this in a way that shows that I am fun to be around. Okay, so they're going to ask you a question, or they should, at the end, where they'll say, do you have any questions for us? Y'all, the right answer to that question is always yes, and you need to have a list of questions prepared. Now, please don't like go on for hours asking every detailed. I mean, this isn't the time to just like take up all their time, because their time is precious always. But having 2 to 3, even 4 questions, depending if you feel like that they're solid questions, I would encourage you to have those. Now, one of my favorite questions that I think you should ask is, what do you love best about working here? If you're asking the person interviewing you that, and they can't think of anything nice to say about the place where they work, that's a pretty good indicator that this might not be a good gig for you, right? So you want to know, what do you love about your job? And then you can ask them, you know what's the level or depth of orientation? What challenges are you currently facing? What are your plans for future growth? Those are some good questions. You could say, what's a typical day like in this job? You know, would I be working mostly by myself or as a part of a team? All those sorts of things. But don't ask questions that you should already know the answer to. So if you can find out the answers to those questions, that's not what you're looking for here. Okay. So, but make sure that you do have a prepared answer, or some prepared questions at that time. Okay, the forbidden question. You cannot ask in a first interview, you can't ask them, how much does this job pay? And I know that's really aggravating, because for many of us, that's like really going to determine whether or not we even want the job, right? Like you're sort of like, depending on how much this pays will depend on whether or not I send a thank you note. No, just kidding. That's horrible advice. Okay. But again, you're not allowed to ask them about money, but they are allowed to ask you about money. Now we're talking about during the interview process. Okay. So this is before you've received a job offer. So don't ask this question. Okay. Just make sure that you don't. When you do, it kind of is a little bit off putting. It's sort of like, it makes people think that that's maybe all you care about, right? Is if you ask about the money, and that may or may not be true, because we all have bills to pay, right? But just make sure that that's not a question you bring up. Okay, these are some questions that interviewers should never ask you. They're not supposed to ask about your age, your marital status, your health status. They're not supposed to say, hey, are you going to have any babies anytime soon? Like those are illegal questions. They're not allowed to ask you those. So you'd have to think about, if you were ever asked one of those questions, you'd have to think about your response to that. But here's one of the things I would tell you. If they're asking you an illegal question during the interview, what does that say about their compliance, right? What does that say about them as a company? So think in terms of that. It might be just an innocent mistake where they say like, how old are you? Like, I mean, and they weren't even thinking, but maybe they're like, gosh, you have really good answers, for someone your age. That may be what they're thinking, right? But so they may just put their foot in their mouth, and it may just be an error. But I would just let you know, these are not things they're supposed to be able to talk to you about. But here's some uncomfortable questions they can legally ask. They can ask if you've ever been convicted of a crime. They can ask if you can show proof that you're legally eligible to work in the United States. And they can also ask, can you perform the job's essential functions with or without reasonable accommodations? And so if they ask you these questions, and if any of these apply to you, or are something that you need to think about how you would answer those questions. So if you were convicted of a crime when you were 17 and you made a dumb decision, then you need to probably own that and say, listen, when I was young and dumb, I was young and dumb, and I made this mistake. I have not received so much as a parking ticket in the last 5 years. And I did all of my community service and I did all of the things I was supposed to do. And I regret that I made that decision. But a lot's changed in my life, and I'm really proud of who I've become. Since that time, I've graduated from college and done these things. But you do want to think in terms of what you would say if those questions were asked to you. Okay, so what if it's not going well, right? I don't know if you've ever been in an interview situation. If you ever are just feeling like, gosh, the pressure is building, they just keep asking me hard questions. Honestly, that may be the point. They may be trying to simulate a situation where you're under pressure to see if you burst out crying, right? So sometimes, if you want to be a nurse in the ICU, there will be some stressful days. So maybe it's appropriate that they would put you, under pressure in this situation. So again, I always say, if it's not going well, things are rough, maybe you just pause for just a minute and you say, can I just have 1 minute? Let me just think about that for a second, and then regroup, take a deep breath, and give it your best shot. And sometimes, you're the person being interviewed, so it may be going much better than you think. And just because they're asking you hard questions, it doesn't mean that that they don't like you. It could just be like, no, these are the questions that we really need answers to. And so that may be the reason that they're asking you those particular questions. So, give it some time. I would say that it could also be a sign of their culture. So if they're just, if it feels like they're just jerks, okay, you should take note of that, right? If it's just like, man, they just seem mean, or they seem to think it's really funny to make me squirm, or they seem to, it feels like they're making fun of me. I would just tell you to take note of that, because that's something that you might want to think about when you're making your decision if you're offered a position. Okay, so now we're going to talk about after the interview. All right, we just have a few more slides, and then I'll take questions from you all if you have them. But after the interview, I want you to go out to your car. I want you to take a deep breath and use that Padfolio you brought to write down some notes, to maybe say like, yeah, that one, I didn't feel so good about this. I didn't really like their answer. It doesn't really feel like that this would be the kind of environment I'd be happy in. This is also a great time. Write down the interview questions that they asked you that like you can remember, that you're like, gosh, I need to practice that for the next interview, right? That's a question that was a good one that maybe I should work on. But really, do a gut check and say like, goodness, what's my body trying to tell me about the situation that I was just in there? Is that an environment that I think I would enjoy working in? So make some notes. If they said some things, that you're like, oh yeah, I need to remember these few things. Or maybe if they don't have business cards, maybe you're just taking down notes of all the names of all the people that were in your interview, so you can be sure that you follow up with each one of them. Your mother was right. Thank you notes are powerful, right? I don't know if you had a mother like mine who, like after high school graduation, made me sit down and write all of my thank you notes in one day, to send to all the people who sent me a graduation gift. But when you send a thank you note, it's powerful. It says like, I understand like professionalism. I know how this works, and so you will stand out as the applicant who really respects and appreciates the interviewer. So this can be a very simple note, y'all. It doesn't have to be very long, but you just say, Dear Bertha, thank you so much for taking time to interview me yesterday for the analyst position at your firm. I really enjoyed learning more about the position, and I hope that I will have the opportunity to interview with you again. Sincerely, Jane Doe, right? And so again, it's just a very sincere thing. I think it's really neat too when you can, if you could say something personal about each person. So like, I hope you and your family have a wonderful time in Red River this weekend. If they mentioned in the interview that they were going on a vacation that week or something. So think about, what can you talk about that would just show like, hey, I'm a good human, and I'm kind and thoughtful. And so I'm a fan of handwritten notes. The reason I am is because I don't think we get good mail anymore, right? When I go to check the mail today, it's just going to be like a water bill and like some junk mail, right? So it's pretty neat when you get a handwritten note. So if you could send them a handwritten note to work, I think that would be really cool. You can, if all you have is their email address, certainly send them a note by email. But this is also a great opportunity to reiterate a point that you wish you had made during the interview. Like, I got to thinking after the interview, and when you asked me about my computer skills, I didn't even think to tell you about the fact that I know how to do blah, blah, blah. Okay, so things that you wish you would have done, you can talk about that there. This is a chance to demonstrate your written communication skills, so do not misspell words. Don't fail to capitalize their name. I mean, if you're not good at those sorts of things, have somebody look at it for you, because you certainly don't want to misspell the person's name in the email that you're sending. You don't want to embarrass yourself when you're communicating through a written format. Now, once you get an offer, this is when you can talk about what is it going to pay? What would be the benefits package? You could ask them, is there room for advancement? What's the career path? So these are questions that you might ask after you have an offer. Depending on the situation, let's say that you're interviewing at lots of different places and you have several offers out there. You'll want to have as much information as you can have to really compare those opportunities. So for example, let's say that you were offered a job at WT and another job at Pantex, or that's not a good example. Let's say you get offered a job at WT and then you get offered a position that, let's say that just at a like a small business where there's just like 2 employees, let's pretend. Okay, so you have these 2 opportunities you're comparing. Well, let's say that the salary is really great at the mom and pop business that has offered you this job, and at WT the salary is not so great. Well, if you know anything about working at WT, we have some great benefits, right? A great retirement, some really great insurance, that sort of thing, which I'm really thankful for in this time. But what I would say is that you want to make sure you're comparing all those different aspects of the job offer before you make a decision, rather than just saying, gosh, I'm just going to base this decision solely on what are you paying me per hour, or what's the annual salary. You want to really have some good information. And so be sure you ask that. You do not have to accept the job right then, right? You can say, well, thank you so much for the offer. I just need a few days to think about this. When will you need my response? You could ask those sorts of things, and they're like, well, actually, we need to know today. Then, you could say, well, may I call you back in a few minutes? But again, make sure that you have a time frame as far as when they're expecting to hear from you, and you'll want to communicate appropriately with the people who've made the offer. All right, so now we're at the time for questions. So Kim is going to unmute everybody in the call, and so we'll be able to all visit. All right, somebody come up with a good question so we'll know how to do this, okay?
Like an interview question?
Just either way, or just a question that you might have for me after listening to the presentation. Is there something that you want to know about interviewing that you haven't learned?
When you talk about yourself, what are some key things to talk about? Because I know you did talk about like communicating our strengths, but how do we communicate that into like a more professional way?
Okay, yeah. So Hannah, tell me about you, your major, and sort of what you're studying, because that'll give me a good example that I can use when I'm doing this.
Okay, so I am a music education major.
Okay.
I am a senior.
Awesome.
What else did you need to know?
That's okay. So tell me your dream job when you graduate. What would you love to do? Teach music?
My dream job is to teach elementary music, hopefully.
Elementary. Okay, awesome. So what you would say would be so much different than what I would say for my dream job, right? So I'm in my dream job right now, and so I wouldn't talk about how I love children, right? I mean, because people will be like, well, that's cool, but that's not relevant, right? But in your case, Hannah, you can say, I've been working with children since I was 14. I've either been a nanny or a babysitter or a child care worker. Like, you could give specific examples of the things that you're able to do. And so when you think in terms of your strengths, Hannah, do you remember any of your top 5?
Yes, I have achiever, responsibility, developer.
That's plenty.
Okay,
but here's what so what I love about developer is that developers are committed to the improvement of people, right? And so if you think in terms of, listen, I have been wanting to teach music for forever, and one of my strengths is developer, and that means that, I really invest in people and I don't give up on anybody, and so I would be so excited to have this opportunity to help children develop their musical skills. I want them to develop a love for music that will last their whole life. I mean, so really being able to think in terms of how your developer could actually help you be a great music teacher could be really cool. Now, Hannah, as a music education major, you have a very clear career path lined out. I don't know if any of you feel this way, but I was jealous of people who were education majors, because like you get out as an education major and you become a teacher. But if you're like me, I was a marketing major, so you get out and you become a whatever you want, right? I'm just saying. And so you're one of the things that all of you should do is really study those job postings before you go in and think in terms of with my specific skill set, with my strengths, what could I do that would be a real asset for you? And Hannah, let's say that you're wanting to let's say that you're applying for a position at Canyon ISD, and part of their mission is to develop musical geniuses that will change the world. That would be you should work at that school. That would be fun, right? Okay, so you could really talk about, I love your mission of developing musical geniuses. And that's like that really speaks to me because of these strengths that I have. So, every school district kind of has a tagline, right? Like developing leaders to change the world, or something like that, right? So being able to speak to, I know it's your mission at this school that you really are working, to help kids, and I know that you're a Title I school, and so that means that you've got a lot of kids that probably don't have a whole lot of background in music, and so I want to expose them to all types of music, and so you'd be able to really speak to the particular opportunity that you're applying for.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Thanks for asking the question. Anybody else? Hi, Kaylee.
I know my parents always told me, like, when I did apply for a job and after I did my interview, to like follow up with them, like tell them to like where they're at with their decision or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, if there's like a certain timeline to do that, or like how soon, too soon, or
Okay, so I also have an achiever as a strength, and so like I love to check the boxes and to do it the right way. Does that make sense? And so I appreciate, Kaylee, where you're coming from. I think it depends on the situation that you're in, but let's start with, okay, so you get out to your car in the parking lot. You had your interview at 10 in the morning. If it were me, I would make sure that my thank you notes went out in that day's mail so they're getting them the very next day, because that's impressive, right? That means you went to some trouble to make sure that they got that thank you note the very next day, rather than like going home and hanging out for a while and then 3 days later thinking, that would probably be a good job, I guess I'll write a thank you note, and so then they don't get it until they've already made a decision, and so that thank you note isn't really helping you, right? So one of the questions that you may want to ask during the interview itself is like, when do you plan to make a decision? Kind of what's your timeline? And at that point, I would tell you, you certainly don't want to call them every day, and I would even tell you, after you've followed up once, I would be cautious about following up a second time. So I would send a thank you note, and then I might follow up in a week or so if I haven't heard anything about the job. But respect their timeline. So if one of the things they said is, listen, we're not making any decisions till the end of next month, right? Then I might wait till closer to that time to be able to call them and say, hi, this is Kaylee. I interviewed for the analyst position that you have available. I just wanted to follow up and find out where you were in the process, and just to let you know how interested I am in the job. And again, one of the things that displays, a lot of students are like, that is so weird. I would never do that. That is going to be the most awkward call, but I'm telling you, do it, because it says like, I really want this job, and I'd prefer to hire someone who really wants the job as opposed to someone who doesn't really care, right? Any job will do. That's not who I'm looking for. So I agree with your parents and think you should definitely follow up. It does get awkward if you're like calling every day. Have you decided? Do you like me anymore now? I mean, is there you want me to do another trick for you? Like, that gets weird. So, but good question, Kaylee. Thank you for asking.
We have a question in chat about what are more questions to ask the interviewer. The person says they have a bad habit of needing to go process everything to see what questions I need to ask. Okay.
That's a very good one. Okay, so I'm going to think about that on the spot, and I'm going to say this. You can prepare, again, it's like studying for a test, right? When you're going for your interview, you need to look at it like that. You need to devote some time to it. So you're going to spend 30 minutes on their website really exploring. You may spend a couple of hours reading the strategic plan or anything about them on the news. You're going to go back and look at that job posting where they have said, here's what we're looking for in a nurse at our hospital. And so you're going to review those things. So if you're studying, there are going to be like authentic, good questions that are going to come from your research. Like, I noticed in my reading that you all are looking to expand into the Florida area. When is that expansion going to take place? Okay. Or I noticed that you're about to start making ventilators. I love ventilators. Okay, whatever. But you want to make sure that in your research, it's going to bring some things to your mind that you're going to think to yourself, you know what, that's something I want to know. That's something that would make a difference to me. So make sure that as you study, you come up with those questions. Now, if you have that list during the interview, if let's say during the interview those questions get answered, well, then don't ask those questions, right? You'll just kind of go through your list and look. But if you're thinking that the questions are just going to come to you during the interview, that's not when the questions are developed. In my opinion, those are developed in the before phase. I hope that was helpful, whoever asked the question. Good
That
one.
was actually what I was going to add to the conversation too, is just go in with a really long list of questions. And as they're asking questions and telling you things, if you want more information, jot it down while they're talking so that you can go back. Because you're right, you're not going to come up with them on the spot. We've all been there, and it doesn't work very well. Well, Amber, it's 6:28.
Okay.
We're just about out of time. It's not considered rude to write during the interview. So that was another question.
Oh no, take some notes.
Say, obviously you don't want to, you don't want to look like you're on reconnaissance for somebody.
Yes.
But yeah, taking notes is good.
So listen, I know some of you are here because someone's required you to be here. I hope some of you just thought this would be so interesting that you couldn't wait to do it. But I hope you've learned something tonight. Just know we really want to help you in career services. So if you get the opportunity, let's say you apply for an internship that you so want the internship or the job. You can set up an appointment with us in Handshake, and we can actually run through some possible interview questions with you. We also have a really great mock interview program where you can actually practice with a volunteer from the community who comes in to do these interviews. Interviewing is a skill that you can get better at. Who used to mock interview every single time there was an opportunity to do that, and his interviewing skills got so much better. So I encourage you to do that. I just want you to know that we believe in you. We hope that you're all safe and healthy. Thank you for social distancing from us tonight, but we hope to see you in our office soon. Good luck in all of your coursework, and we will talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Great. And I just reshared the information in case you didn't get it in terms of the elevator pitch and the outcomes information.
Awesome.
And Kylie had a really good thing to say too. Make sure you use an appropriate pen. She said that she used a Colorado State pen when she was in a WT interview. And so,
Kylie.
Yeah, not a good thing.
That's good. That's really good. All right. Y'all take care. Have a good night. Bye, everybody.